All right, can I just hear who I have with me today online?
Karine.
I didn't hear that.
Karine.
Okay. Anybody
George.
else?
This is George from the Bahamas.
Okay, George.
Orisha here.
And Orisha. So we have 3 persons. So that, George, did you say George? So it's George, just George, Kareem, and Orisha.
Yes.
All right, good. All right, so this is our second session, and I want us to look at developmental and sociocultural communication barriers. There are some things we can talk about. Not everything is in the slide. I'm going to rely on your experiences. I just share with you some general context, and then I'm asking that we think about it. I am assuming that I cannot assume that the fact that you're doing a course in gerontology means that you have been working with senior citizens or you have them in your lives and maybe having some of the experiences you want to share. But I think we can even use the experiences from our own families if we do not have that kind of working experience to relate to some of the concepts that I will cover, and most of all, for us to draw from them meaning, look at them in new light and see how we can adjust our means of communication or general methods of communication so that we can work well with older persons. So the objectives for today's session are listed here, learning and behavioral objectives. I am expecting that you will give consideration to the differences in realities between older persons and those of us who care for them or younger adults, and how this impacts our communication. So the realities are going to be different from either end. I want you to make a list of some common barriers to communication that you experience with older persons, and be able to explain some approaches you can use in dealing with some common communication barriers, as explained by Dr. P. Soley, someone that I am drawing on his experience to communicate some of the issues that may be important. And for you to engage as part of your portfolio, coming quickly behind the one yesterday, you are going to engage an older adult in relevant communication experience and document what the insights you gain from it based on our discussions. So at the end of this slide, and I asked Miss Falloon is having little difficulties with her email. I asked her to send the handout to you, so you will get that in short order. I left her playing with the computer. All right, so we are talking about realities. This is a slide that we used yesterday, which looked at the realities of the sender versus the realities of a receiver, and how meaning can be distorted, or it may be successful in communicating if the realities are not far apart. But even if they are, once the shared space in terms of how you encode the message and how you get feedback, that if that is handled well, then those realities will not necessarily make a difference, but there is clarity and you can get your intended purpose, which may be to inform, to entertain, or to get some desired action carried out. Now, one of the issues we have, what are some of the things you hear or you experience as you communicate with older persons? What are some of the complaints you get from maybe caregivers or from other persons who do not understand older people well? What are some of the things you hear about their ways of communicating, and what are some of the barriers?
Well, first of all, they're not really familiar with a lot of jargon and terms that younger people use. Um, they're not, they don't really think that we are approachable to communicate at times. They feel like we're from a different era at times, and they just feel very, I wouldn't say scared, but they just feel like they just probably should just interact to someone who understands them. I don't think they feel like we as younger people and they as older people, we live in two separate worlds. And how we see the world is not how they see it. So that is honestly a big barrier for them in trying to communicate.
Yeah. All right. Anybody else? What do younger persons often say? Based on Orisha's input, it would seem as if she's giving the perspective of the difference between old and young, but it's more so in terms of from their eyes. What about from the eyes of the younger persons now? How do they see older persons, and therefore what makes it difficult for them to communicate to them? Orisha touched on some of it in the terms of you are in two different worlds using different language and so. But what about from the perspective of the older person themselves? What can you share?
The really young ones seem to be scared, genuinely scared to speak to them. Some of them speak of their wrinkles, and they tend to associate the older persons with being nasty or something. They seem scornful of them, based on my experience with some very young persons and older persons.
Okay. So, one of the common myths that we often hear that older persons, they have diminished capacity. Their health is getting worse. Their strength, their thought processes, and a lot of, especially some of us who grow up with our parents, grandparents, and we see how they manage stuff. They were able to take care of us. They made decisions. They were quick on the move and all of that. And then all of a sudden we see them not moving as fast. Then they are not as talkative. They are not as strong health-wise, physically, and their health. So we tend to think that there is diminished capacity. And yes, there is, in that they are not moving at the pace as they were before. But does it mean that that affects the way they communicate? One of the suggestions is that persons working with older persons must understand this psychological journey. Even as we are going through, my daughter has looked at me. She wanted me to do something with her children, and I told her how tired I was, and I just didn't want to engage in the activity. And she said, "Boy, you're really mash up." She saw me as this strong person, and when I tell them I'm not feeling well and I want to just rest a while, they cannot understand. They not only say it out loud, but their faces look so concerned. They cannot believe that the mother that they had some years ago, who was always on top of things, they could not get away with any of their schemes. And I would deal with all the challenges that came. They cannot understand, how is it that I am so slow now? And they call it, so they say I'm mash up, a Jamaican term that means you're now weak, you're not as strong as before. But we have to understand the psychological journey. We have to understand the whole issue of personality development. Issues relating to maintaining control, searching for legacy are two issues that I'm going to raise in the in this session. And we, persons working with older persons, will need to understand what it is that is happening with them psychologically, physically, and otherwise. And therefore, how can we be advocates for older persons, bearing in mind where they are, what they have achieved in life, And though they may not be at the forefront in moving things, how can we ensure that they get their space and that what is for them goes to them? So we need to be, one of the first things, we need to be advocates for older persons. Now, we can only be that if we understand their context. And the book I spoke about yesterday by Dr. Soley, he is somebody who, through experience with his own family and with counseling, caregivers, and persons who are old, he has a wealth, years of experience in working with these persons, and I've learned a lot of lessons that he shares. And he is concerned that while we see a lot in the literature about the developmental stages until we get to old age, there is not much written after that. Well, his book was written a few years well back. Since that, it could be that new research has come up. I tried to find if there was anything in terms of what we understand about the developmental process for older persons. And I have not found much, but maybe you can share if it goes against what Dr. Soley is saying. One of the limitations in using his work is that it is not one of those kinds of research that is marked by statistical measures where he can say the difference between so and so and explain it using statistical terms. But his years working with them has caused him or led him to put things in some kind of perspective, which makes sense to me. And as I share them, I want us to kind of relate to them and see if we can find experiences, similar experiences that you have encountered for these areas that he has pointed out. Just a minute. Have you emailed it to them?
Yes, I did.
Okay, good. Thank you. All right. So Ms. Falloon has just told me that she managed to open the document and she has emailed it to you. All right. So he thinks, so while we know about in the first few years of life what children do and some of the milestones that they have to get over and come to terms with those developmental milestones in order for them to move successfully to the next phase, for the people think that, you know, development at old age, there is no other development. But for him, he thinks that some developmental drivers are maintaining control and searching for a legacy. What do these things mean? Well, he said, why the need to gain control? Haven't they had control all their lives? Or you mean gaining control? They have been controlled, and that's how my children think. You were always in charge. You were always telling us what to do. When we need good advice, we could get it from you. You made quality decisions that impacted our lives, our careers, and where we are now, and the values we have, the decisions we make. So why do you still need to, you would ask, why would somebody at Wooliden need to gain control? But we have to understand, according to Soley, that old persons have gotten to the stage where they are experiencing losses. So their physical strength is not as at peak as it was before. Health-wise, there is a difference, both physically, mentally, and otherwise. So we know conditions start to set in, especially if we approach old age with some risk factors, then we're more likely to develop certain conditions. As we age, we have different conditions. So there are losses in that way. In terms of their peers, how many of you are aware that once people get to certain age groups, when they get old, one of the things they spend time doing is looking in the death column? Anybody is aware of this? Any experience in this area?
Yes, my grandparents in particular, they spend a lot of time watching obituaries.
Likewise.
All right, come again. I think maybe two persons trying to speak. Orisha, go ahead.
So I was saying my grandparents in particular, they spend a lot of time watching obituaries.
All right.
columns.
All right. Anybody else?
Yeah, they listen to the death news because as a younger person, you will realize that the death news come on at a certain time of the day just because you are around them and hear them listening to it each day.
Yeah.
Or they just go and turn on the thing to hear it. You know, at that point alone, throughout the day, that's when they turn on the radio thing.
Yes. Because this is one of their ways. Yes, David? All right. So this is one of their ways of staying in touch. People they went to school with, people they worked with, people they knew from their communities of their age group. They are losing them because some go before the other. So you can imagine you're not as strong. You're health-wise, you are on the downside. All your friends, all your acquaintances, people who had experience like yours growing up, you can't get to share. And this is what Orisha was saying now in terms of the differences between the old and the young, because I think you cannot relate to the older person because they live in a different era. Their experiences were different. One of the main things, they were not in touch with technology as now, and some of the things that are considered acceptable among younger persons, for them this is a no-no from their era. So their peers, when they listen to the news, and a lot of them accumulate funeral programs. You just go to a funeral, just take back the program for them, and they like to look at it, whether it's somebody they know or not. They find some joy in that. So they have other priorities. They are losing authority. Now, many still maintain authority. Some older persons, they are the ones who can speak to their grandchildren and they hear. But we find that many times at this age, they are so joyful about having grandchildren that these grandchildren tend to get away with some of the things that their own children could not get away with. But in terms of authority, they're losing some of it because caregivers, some of whom may be their children, and whether or not they are the caregivers, but they're even their children who think they are now in charge of them. Some of them have power of authority, and therefore the authority that they had, they are losing some of the control that they would have in this era. In terms of their identity, who they are, people forgetting about the contribution they made to their life and what they were known for. So they need to gain some control. Everything is just leaving. Their physical shape, their financial independence. So they need always to create that balance. They do not want to, having lived all these years and gained all these experiences, to just give up everything. There are some things they have no control over, like their health, which is diminishing, their strength, which is diminishing. But whatever it is that they can hold on, they need to gain control. You cannot take everything from them. They need to be in charge of something. And that is very, very important in terms of communicating with older persons. It's not about letting them know that, look, this is my time now. You did a wonderful job of raising me or of taking care of things or doing what you did in the past. It is my time to take care of you. No, that sounds loving and kind, but it means for them that they are letting go, and it's not so easy to lose control, and therefore that can become a barrier to communication. So remember the two developmental things that Soul is talking about: losing control or gaining control, and the other one is leaving a legacy. For legacy, he explained that this is the process of it's a life review. They want to be remembered for something. And they will use opportunity, even when you want to communicate about something else, they will want to stay on a particular topic or explain something that is supposed to reinforce in your mind what it is that they want to be remembered for, what they see as important points in their lives that you ought not to forget. So because the issue is about what will preserve my memory long after I am gone. And this has reality for me. This is reality for me. I see this in my own father. and in terms of some of what he talks about and what is important. And we realize even now, things that we did not understand when we were younger, we are understanding it now. We are hearing his perspective. He was not talking about it then, but he is talking about it now. And we realize why he was working so hard to make something for his children, because he wants to be remembered as a good father. And I can remember as we were growing up, there were times when he would say, well, I know that by the time you're finished school and you get a profession, you're going to move into a new community, get a nice house, and you're going to take your mother and you're going to leave me behind. I did not realize then that he was echoing a concern that he had to know, because he wanted to be remembered as a good father. And we see him as a good father. And as he goes over his stories now, it reinforces for us that he was building a legacy. He wanted his memory to be in the context of some particular eras of life. So there are two phases: understanding one's life experiences. So the communication process is going to be filled with some of this. When you want to talk about other things, they'll be talking about their experiences. And they also want to, so two phases: either they're sharing their experiences or they want to pass on what it is that they learned so that you yourself can be a version of them. Anyone can identify with this? Does it ring any bell? Do you hear any stories along this line? Does it sound familiar?
Yes, indeed. Some stories that are, you know, they're from the 1940s. They take so much joy and pride in saying, think like literally when they talk, when my grandparents talk, it's almost like I was there.
Well, that's a good thing if you can experience that being there, because we'll come to that, because one of the things you have to do is immerse yourself in the story and just dream about being there. And that makes it good for you to communicate with them.
Yeah.
All right. So there are three types of legacy. Default legacy, no chance. You don't get a chance to go over what has happened. So parents may pass before they are able to share the things that are important to them. So there's no chance for them to review their life. So while they are alive, they are going to review their story. They want to talk about the past things. But if they go suddenly without doing this, then it's a default legacy. Sometimes where you have to hear from their friends, or you find items from their past, maybe sometimes old letters. Some people talk about letters, love letters that they find between the grandparents or so, or their parents, which tell them something about what happened. So that one is a default legacy. So you will learn some things from people's parents, especially when persons are not close to their relatives, or when you come in as a caregiver, a health provider, who does not understand who this person has been, his contribution to life. And you may find that out from others, you may read about it somewhere, but that is what we call default legacy. But it has to do with what it is about the life of this person that communicates to us the person's values, achievements, and so forth. Then there is political legacy, where they hand over things from their family treasury so that you can continue it. One of this is where some older persons may communicate to their younger so grandchildren and so forth. You know, I wanted to be a lawyer, or I wanted to be a nurse, and I did not get to achieve it for whatever reason. You need to continue this. I want you to become it. Or naturally, because of the impact they have made, the names they have made for themselves, it just automatically becomes a legacy where children and others just walk into it. You have to understand that for Dr. Soli, he's writing from experience with older persons and working with them. So a lot of this will have to do with family connection, but it does not mean that it does not carry value for those of us who are providing care from a different angle. And then there is the organic legacy, where persons will, in order for their memory, in order to continue the world, the community, or an organization to continue thinking about them and their contributions, they may want to leave make some donations or create some building, donate something so that their names. And sometimes they themselves are not the ones to create it, but because others have seen what they have done in terms of contributing to the lives of others, they may name buildings or parks or roads or so after them. And this is a way to connect the present with this person who is, so it is communicating about this person. So based on all of this, we want to look at some behaviors of older persons that act as barrier to communication. And Dr. Sowley not only raises these issues, but he also provides some suggestions as to how we can say things better as we seek to communicate with older persons, bearing in mind that they want to leave a legacy and that they want to maintain control or gain control of their lives, and considering all the things they are losing. We have to understand how this comes across and kind of interpret it that way, and maybe rephrase and rethink how we respond to them in our verbal and non-verbal messages. How do we manage some of these conflicts? And so I'm going to share a story. Maybe you haven't had a chance to open your slide, so we have to look at the story on the screen. And he says, I sat next to a family of 4 in a cafe. They were there for an apparent family meeting over breakfast. The family consisted of an elderly couple in their late 70s to 80, and their son in his early 50s. Soon it was obvious that the son was irritated about his parents not moving at a faster pace in getting seated, making their orders and greeting strangers. Dad took what seems like forever to settle on an order and even took time out to make jokes. Of course, he wanted to get back to work, or he wanted to get to work or do whatever else he had to do for the day. His son sounded irritated. So Dad took what seemed like forever to settle on an order and even took time out to make jokes with the waitress. His son sounded irritated and urged him to complete the order and stop wasting the time of the waitress. His mother, however, chided the son on not wanting his dad to have some fun. With the order settled, the meeting started. Apparently, Dad needed to do a written test to renew his driver's license and had been taking a long time to prepare for this test. The meeting was to iron out this matter, to determine what the purpose of the delay was and emphasize why it was important for Dad to be driving. So Dad tried to explain what his son perceived as his lack of preparedness by sharing, and how he explained, he tried to share his ideas about test taking in general. And of course, that wasn't helping his son. So, you know, sometimes you want to talk about something specific with the older person. It could be in terms of what you want with some of the things that you have accumulated, or where you want to live, or whatever discussions you want to have with them. But instead of dealing straight with the issue at hand, they tend to go around and tell you stories and talk about other things and do everything except giving you the answers that you need. And of course, we get upset. Of course, we are concerned because we need to move on. We are in haste. So while Dad gave his opinion about test taking in general, and I can imagine him saying, you know, when we write tests, it doesn't mean that we can do things. Tell me some of the other things you think he may be saying. because he's going to about doing a test now. What are some of the concerns he may be saying about testing, as he spoke about test taking in general?
He's probably saying if he's ever taken a test before of that manner, you know, how does he know what to expect, that kind of thing. He probably is thinking that he knows, or he's more experienced in that field as opposed to
than those who setting the test.
Yeah.
Yes.
And he knows, you know, the rigmaroles of the test and so on. And who is the son now to think that he's suitable to
He
take?
needs to do this test. All right. Anybody else? All right. So he even offered his opinion about how the rules of the road had changed since he was a young man. His son would have none of this discussion and insisted that the focus should be on doing and passing the test. He doesn't want all these stories and philosophical utterings. For him, the issue at hand is doing the test. You need to do the test. No doubt he was tired, frustrated, had not the time to be driving them around, and he wanted him to get to the point. And then to him, that may have sounded so trivial, giving your opinion about what is test and what is not test, and how rules have changed. So his voice and body language communicated anger, frustration, impatience, scolding, and sarcasm. He kept interrupting the conversation to point out the weaknesses in his father's arguments and disappointment in his attitude towards the issue at hand. The meeting ended with the meal untouched, and with the bill paid, they walked out of the cafe. So the problem not solved, an upset son and a disappointed father, because they have different perspective. They were looking at what is important, and as Orisha said, it may be that what you are putting priority on is not important. The person who's setting the test, maybe I know more than them, or, you know, things have changed so much. So he wanted to talk about, but I think one of the ways that son could have all right, so let me ask you, instead of when he spoke about how rules have changed, what is something that the son, he said the rules of the road have changed since he was young. What way, what kind of communication, what could be said by the son at this point? Instead of getting angry and impatient and pointing out his stupidity, what could he have said to maybe trigger a continuation of a better dialogue? How do you think, what could he have said?
I mean, from the father's side, my thought was there's so much of things that rules have changed.
Yes.
You know, the older people, they have driven all their years based on some old rules. They are quite familiar with those things. But once things change, they are not they find it difficult to accept the new, and they don't want to go to a test where they have a fear of failing, and then that would be a blot. So they don't want to go through that. So sometimes they go around the topic and they bring these things. But I think, yeah. So I think the son should have, I mean, if he had that sort of idea that this may be what is going on with his father, he could have put it in a different perspective and be more helpful in how it can be done. And, you know, Dad, if you have a problem, I'm here to assist you with it. We will go through this together, and then we'll make sure that you go through it well. And that's been the approach, rather than the irritation and the body language that probably went wrong with that situation.
Yes, well put. Because the other way, the other route they took ended up with a deadlock. They left without a solution to the problem. But as you say, making an offer to say, I will help you to work through this. And you could even ask, in what ways do you see how the rules have changed? How have the rules changed? And that is an open-ended question that allows for him to give other the opinion. But because he is working with a different pace, he has his own priorities to attend to, then it is pushing him in a corner to force out of his father the kinds of responses that he wants to deal with. But yes, you're right, opening it and offering to help and making it, and not putting the blame squarely at his feet, but recognizing that he has issues that become barrier to getting this done. So Solly talks about the geriatric gap. I know he's not the inventor of this word. When I try to look at the literature to see what is written about geriatric gap, what I see, it refers to different situations where the healthcare system or other provider system is not keeping pace with the needs of the elderly, or there is not the understanding about what the older persons need in order to survive in a complex world. And therefore, we tend to face the challenges with the little knowledge that we have about new era things. But for him, he means that there's a lack of understanding about the developmental stage of the older persons. We think that development has stopped. We get to the place where you're now old. And going back to what I started out in terms of diminished capacity, they're not thinking that at that stage other things are going on. And therefore, he throws right back into this the 2 points that I raised earlier about maintaining control of their lives amidst all the daily losses that they experience, and also discovering and communicating their legacy, or what it is that they will be remembered for. So from his point of view, when you do not understand that these things are salient, these things are important in the lives of the older person, it does not help us to understand the communication that takes place between us and them, between me and Uno. Because you do not understand their developmental stage. So I'm going to share now some areas in which he sees this coming out very often, and you can agree to or disagree to or add other perspectives to these areas that he thinks are obvious as older persons seek to, communicate about their legacy and maintain control of their lives. So the first thing that he talks about is the lack of urgency. You are hurrying, but they are in no hurry. You have an agenda because you need to get other things done. It doesn't necessarily mean that they are going to move at the same pace. We may think, oh, it's diminished capacity. They are slower now. They are not as sharp. And this is so. But most times, it's about they take action in their own time. So it isn't about hurrying to get somewhere. It's about, look here, I will do this when I want. I'm not ready for it yet. So let me hear, do you hear about this, the things that you want to be done? Just like with the son, I think we don't want to have to go into personal experiences. Just right back to the story we just looked at, where the son needed the license to be renewed, because that is going to allow him to give up some of the time that he would have to spend to taking them around, that you can now spend to do other things. But his father was not moving at the pace that he wanted. He's taking action in his own time if he's ever going to do that test. He's in no hurry and he has reasons to do it. And the same thing, I think some of the common things, as I did this in years past, I remember some of the experiences people shared. One of them is you deciding when an older person needs to take a bath and when they need to go to bed and when they need to turn off the TV, and when they need to wake up in the mornings, and when they need to, the times at which they need to eat. And what we want, which may fit well into our schedule, is not what they want. I'm not in any hurry to do any of what you see. And persons have shared in terms of even bathing before going to bed. Old people don't necessarily want to bathe every day. Yeah, they may not want, or if they have a bath in the morning, they may not want in the evening, and they tell you, my father will say, no dirt no fall down on me. Because for him, look here, I'll do it. I'm accustomed, and especially if they're accustomed to be living by themselves, doing things by themselves, and then they have somebody who comes in, or maybe a caregiver, or they are going to live with a child who wants them to do things in their own time, when to get up, when to go to bed, when to change your clothes and all of that. There are going to be communication problems because they have their own perspective about when this should happen. All right, so this is a story that Dr. Solis shared, another story that he shared. The ex-family is concerned about the living conditions in the home where mom lives. Attempts have been made to purchase a new house. Money is not the issue, and she knows that. She refuses to leave her old home where everything, according to her, is convenient. She had a fractured hip, which has resulted in her inability to climb the stairs to her usual bedroom. So she settles in a much smaller room downstairs. The roof is in dire need of repairs. The paint is peeling and some fixtures are old and shaky. The children got frustrated and told her that they expect to find her on the floor hurt on one of their visits, as she doesn't want a caregiver and there are threats to her safety. So she just casually responded, tell me where exactly you want to find me when you find me helpless. In the garden, under the table, beside the kitchen, or near to the cupboard. I would be livid. You would think, no, wait, you don't understand that this is for your own good. This is urgent, and this is how you're handling it. You would feel hurt because you think that you're communicating your concern, your love, and desire to care for, but this is the response. This person is in no hurry to do what you want because for whatever reason. So the children got frustrated and they left her. All right. I can imagine one of the things driving that kind of communication and care and desire to do better is the fact that my friend's going to be looking at where my mother lives and how the house look bad and we live in a decent place and we are going to feel ashamed. So they left her. They sought counseling and were told to allow her to make the decisions about where she would live. They changed the tactics and told her how bad the roof and fixtures were, how the paint was peeling and the furniture unsafe. They pledged to change the roof, fix the broken areas, and call in the painters and furniture persons. Her response? That is too much to spend on this old house. It's not worth it. I can move in with my friend and we can share the cost of living. Let me discuss it with her tonight. That option became a reality and she called the shots and moved at her pace and was happy thereafter. So the decision was hers. It was thrown back to her. So one of the things, the lessons from this is that we have to give them room. You ask them open-ended question, what it is that they want to do. Instead of setting the deadlines and for them to move at the pace that we want. Our communication should be more about our urgency, but what it is that they want. So that, remember, they are trying to regain control of themselves and their time. They're losing everything else. Even you want to tell me where to go live now. And that is why I'm sure some of you are aware of this, that sometimes old persons live by themselves in less than ideal conditions. And you remove them and put them into nice, comfortable situations and they want to go back, or if you insist that they stay, they lose it. Yes, they die quickly. Yes, because they are no longer in control. The little thing that they can hold on to, you want to take it away from them.
They become depressed too. Very depressed. They become very depressed.
Very depressed, yes. They know where all their bundles are, where they hid all their goodies, and you take them into a nice place that is in your mind, better. You're taking care of them, but you are communicating that you are running the show. You're taking away from me. So apart from my comfort in my space, mentally it also means that, look here, I'm now a child. I'm living at your mercy. And that can really, as I say, get them depressed to the point that they just give up eating, give up surviving, and they die. So we have to understand, bear in the back of our mind, we have to give them something to be in control of. In this situation, the wheel was turned. Allow the person to make a decision about what you want to do. So she still didn't decide. They were the ones who made this suggestion first that we'll buy you a new house. There is money. She didn't say she wanted one. But what she wanted, she said, okay, I know that you say, let's not go through all of this. Here is my plan. Here is my idea. So you have to be open to listen to their suggestions. So we have to make room for open-ended questions for them to make contributions to what it is that they want. And the response, according to Dr. Soli, is that we must accept their pace as a normal end product of enhanced perspectives. So they have gotten to the point where they can make decisions and stuff for them. They have enhanced perspective now. So it's normal. This is allow them to do it for themselves. Don't take it personally. So even if we think our friends and acquaintances, co-workers are going to think less of us, it is more important to make the older person feel, and when it comes to caregivers, in terms of whether or not what the person who employs me is going to think. So I have to push this person so that I can fit into that mold. I have to protect my reputation. But at the same time, you're depriving them of their own means of control. Understand the difference between speed, punctuality, and being driven, and then provide an option. So speed, for them to move quickly, to make decisions, or to be on time to go for an appointment or all of that. Understand the difference between that and you pushing them. So you do not wait, maybe in preparation for this, instead of driving them and say, we have to be there, you need to come now. We can't wait on you to do that, you need to come. Maybe what we can do is start talking about it from the day before. Tomorrow, remember we have an appointment with the doctor. I called and they said we needed to be there like an hour before. What time do you want us to leave? What time do you want to leave so that we can get there by this time? Give them a chance to be part of the decision making so that they feel that they are in control. We can't come at the last minute and you had told them about this appointment long time ago. You didn't revisit it, but this is the day. You come there, you're not ready. You don't remember that today is the appointment. All right, we have to go now. We have to leave here in 15 minutes. And then we tend to say they are stubborn. They are resistant because they are adults and they have their own perspective and they want to remain in control. So we have to know the difference between, you know, driving them and negotiating with them for actions that will make things happen. We have to become expert at spontaneous facilitation so that, for example, just what I said earlier, somebody come and they are not ready. Okay, what you can do if they are not insistent on getting ready to go, you could facilitate some change and say, okay, there are two things that we can do. We can call the doctor's office and we can make another appointment and put off this one. Or we can go late and then all the persons who are there before us would go ahead of us and then we would end up leaving later to come home. So you decide which it, or we can choose not to go at all. So you're giving some options and the person may decide, all right, let me come, I want to go now. But at least you're throwing it back at them to be in control and to make the decision. So you have to become expert at facilitation. You know, my father has Alzheimer's, and one of the biggest problems in our family is getting different family members to understand what to expect from him, so that he will come and he will talk about how I went to the field yesterday and I gave the cows water and I planted a few banks of yam, and when I was coming back on the bus, so and so happened. And he would sit and say, yeah, and you accommodate the story. It's all in his head, you know, because he's there, he's under protective care, so he's not going anywhere. So you would be there and you're going along with him in his story, and he enjoys the fact that you're listening and nodding. And I have a brother who insists that we must not do. I am not going to tell any lie. I am not going to make it seem as if this makes sense. I want him to know that his stupidness is talking. And of course, you know, they end up in a fight because he either gets silent and does not entertain any arguments from him, or he puts him in his place or whatever. So he doesn't think that the rest of us will go along with his story. And sometimes he's talking straight.
There's a lady that I know of as well who was in a similar situation with two of her daughters.
Mm-hmm.
And she would tell stories, but it's stories of things
Long
that actually
time.
happened, but
Long
like
ago,
40 years
right?
before.
Mm-hmm.
And so she would talk about her husband who had passed away, and, you know, and talk about him in the first person, like he's there, you know,
Mhm.
Bill, I need you to grab my glasses, that sort of thing. And one daughter would entertain her and listen and say, Bill's not here right now, you know, something gentle like that. But the other daughter, much like your brother would say, Bill's dead, mommy, and that sort of thing. And she would cry every time as if she's hearing it for the first time. And I thought that was
Kind of hard.
very
Yeah.
hard, you
So
know?
it's about knowing what is the state of mind of this person? What am I expecting? And remembering that what it is that makes them happy and able to manage their time. So it's not really fooling them. It's about accommodating them. And there is no way, what my brother is saying is that if you do this, you are going to keep him at that level to believe that this is so he will not want to get out. Where is he getting? Where are you getting out of Alzheimer's going? Yes. So it's to understand, and this whole communication process too is going to be impacted by some of those things, not understanding what is happening with the kind of conditions that they have and what are some of the things you can expect and how to deal with it. So that can become difficult. All right. So become expert at spontaneous facilitation, providing options. All right. So that was the first one where we look at lack of urgency, and we look at some of the ways we can look at it. The second one is non-linear conversations. So they're not staying with the subject of a conversation, a lot of things coming up. And sometimes what is happening, he says, it becomes a vehicle for revisiting life events that help to clarify some values. So they may move from one thing to the other and come in. You want to talk about something, and going back talking about something else, which for them has some meaning in it. What is the response? It can produce spontaneous revelations and insights. I grew up knowing that my father was always out working, and he would come home and every cent that he worked, he would give to my mother to take care of us, and he would be gone again. And we could not understand why he was working so hard. And he would tell, every now and again, he would tell stories about people who abused him on the job and how he had to defend himself. But it wasn't until he became old and started getting sick now that he would share with us that he had a very difficult childhood. At 15, he had to go out on his own because he was living with an uncle who had a wife who abused him verbally. And therefore he had to leave and go on his own. And he, in the back of his mind, he did not want his children to come like that. And therefore, for him, it was staying far, working hard, defending his turf and all of that to ensure that he provided, because he did not want that for them. So you're talking about one thing and he would come back, you just come in with this story out of the blue and talking about what he used to do and what he didn't want his children to, he wanted them to go to school and all of that. And for one, it is also reinforcing the fact that he has a legacy. He worked hard, he wanted to be remembered as a hard-working father. And but I went off on that story because I was thinking about spontaneous revelations and insights, because we were looking at it in another way, why he was doing this. But we didn't realize that at the back of his mind was the need to see his children through, ensure there was enough, they shouldn't be hungry. We did not look at it that way. So one of the things we have to do when we hear all these different stories, listen to every piece of the story. Everything takes it to a different era and coming up with a different message. But we need to listen and seek to identify the patterns being shared. We can see it as a sorting, discovery, and remediation tool. They're going back at things and putting meaning to it and sharing it for you to understand. So you discover, they are sharing, and you are discovering it. So we need to accommodate it. So it's not, your communication shouldn't be about, oh, you reached there, so. We're talking about that. When they are talking straight, soak up the story. And even when it's in pieces, soak it up too. And when you hear it over and over, because there's going to be, the next slide I'm going to look at is how they do repetition. You will finally get the pieces put together. So accommodate it and expect the unexpected. Sometimes in the middle of visitors coming, they will blurt out something that you find embarrassing. Or even as they may be visiting your office as their healthcare provider, they may be saying things that put their caregivers or family members on the edge. But you can always expect the unexpected. Expect anything to happen or to be said, because this is who they are. So repetition is another means. They tell the same story over and over again. For them, it may be a means of, reminiscing about things that were exceptional, things that hold values for them. And even the same story as with my father about what he did so that his children could go to school and get an education. It's something we have been hearing over and over again. But what is the value in it? He was a good father. He cared for his children. He wanted the good for his children. And each time you hear it, all you have to do is affirm him and say that, yes, we understand. No, we understand. And that is why we want to take care of you now, because you have done all, you have given all. So repetitions, and it may not be about life story, it may be other things, but remember, as said earlier, sometimes they remember things from way back, depending on what mental condition they are in. Orisha, you have grandparents. Do you hear a lot of repetitions? And how do you accommodate them? How is the family treating these? Sorry to put you on the spot, but anybody else can come in too.
I mean, what I try to do is just try to say like terms like, oh, really? Tell me more.
Yes.
Just interested and not dismissal like, yeah, you told me this like a week ago. And it becomes to a point where they told me the story so much that I could actually say it back again.
The gaps.
But I don't want to make them feel like, again, that I'm taking over. So I allow them to speak, and I just try to understand that, it's really not their fault. They're probably trying to repeat it either because, they just want to say it, or to have some kind of conversation, or to just reinforce how important it is to them. So in that doing, I just allow them to speak, and I just say reassuring words to not sound dismissive.
All right, so as caregivers, as healthcare providers, have any of you had situations where you have older persons coming to you and telling you the same story they told you last visit?
Definitely.
Maybe
especially
about
the ones who are depressed, actually. Is a very, very big feature of depression, because what a lot of times happens is that they relive an inciting event. So they may not tell you different things. So it's almost as if it's not it can be a feature of illness. Like I don't put it down to them developing Alzheimer's or anything like that. Their dementia screens are negative, but they may manifest depression by telling you about all the things that are wrong with them, and a lot of times there isn't anything physically wrong with them. So they're somatized, but they also tell you about an event that caused them to be sad. So whatever, they've been moved by, you know, the children moved them and so on. And every time we're talking through and trying to, you know, get out what they come back to the moving. But I just listen. Sometimes I don't have the time to listen to the full story, but I try to be as, you know, as
accommodating as you can, right? And sometimes it may be helpful in even communicating with the caregivers in terms of how they can help them to walk through this, or refer them to other disciplines where they can manage this. Yes.
I think also most of the time they probably do not remember that they have already told the story. So each time it's like the first time they keep.
It's a new story. Yes, like they're telling you new. So it could be some as Keon just mentioned, it could be that they have spoken about it already. It doesn't have anything to do with diminished mental thing, or it's so important. It's so important. It has to be emphasized. There is a story to tell, and I have to go there. All right, so the response, pay attention to what is being emphasized. As you rightly pointed out, Keon, in this situation, it could be that the fact that I have moved. This is what I'm emphasizing. Moving me. I was in my comfort zone. I have been moved. I miss my space. I miss whatever. These may be issues. And as I said, it may be something that can be raised with those who are taking care of the person. Say, ask them if they have considered, you know, relocation, or why is it that she has been moved, and point out that this may be an issue that is leading to some of what she's experiencing now. So pay attention to what is being emphasized. The fact that a story is told over and over means that there's something in it that you need to garner. Understand repetition as a form of emphasis, and it may give useful information about a person's struggles with the life review process. They're looking over their life. It could be something that was not achieved or was highly achieved, and I'm proud of it, and I want to communicate it. So it may be struggle about reviewing your life and seeing if you had more time, this is what you would have done, or you already did it well. Okay, so an example at the bottom here, wanting a meal prepared a certain way could be a means of controlling daily tasks one was once able to do. So I was a good cook, and you come now and you are cooking for me. And no matter how nice it is, I find fault all the time, because I know I used to do this, and I used to feed the whole family. Everybody used to come and enjoy it, and they are going to find fault, and they may want to tell you how they used to do it. And even if you do it that way and come back, you're still deficient. Yes. All right, so the fourth one is attention to details. So it wasn't working like this all the way. It's not working. It's not how it was working before, so it's better.
What I know is if anybody
comes on, then
going to keep.
Oh, okay. All right.
So when I read the next one,
Okay, let's enjoy the moment. I'm happy to see your faces. So I'm meeting you for the first time apart from Orisha. Okay. The other area, the fifth area, is uncoupling, where there is a disconnect. The older person may not be talking about specific topics. I have known persons who talk about issues with maybe a mother who will not say who a father is, and the person dies without sharing that information. or where are some things hidden, where they, so they don't talk about sometimes how you grew up, what was it like as a child, nothing like that. They won't talk about a specific issue. So it may not be everything, it's just there are some things that you may want to know about, want to hear some other, and sometimes that may be information that you need in order to make decisions about care. But then just not talking about it. What do you? So there's a disconnect. You call it uncoupling. How do you respond to that? For some people, they just leave it alone, and it affects a lot of family issues in terms of the future and what to do, because if you don't know, you just don't know. And sometimes you can hear persons on some call-in programs trying to make links with their families. That's because things were not shared with them. Questions about why did my father leave, or anything, it can be any topic where there's uncovered. Some response. We need to find new ways to reconnect, new ways to get them to start talking again about those particular issues. They could rethink the objective, or be clear about what isn't working. What are you asking? And be committed to restore a connection. So let's say I don't know about how my mother did at school, what she did, some of the experiences that they had. Look here now.
It's okay.
It's on me, but I'm not seeing my slides. All right, it's back. Hello, you there?
Yes.
Arisha?
Yes, we are.
Okay, but you don't have the slide.
You can't see it.
I'm seeing the slide, but they are seeing it's not on this board. Anyhow, we don't have many. If you are listening, Sebastian, can you restore something for me? This screen is not showing, and I don't think people have their printed thing. So Sebastian, All right, so find the response for this is for uncoupling is to find new ways to reconnect, think the objective, and be clear about what isn't working, and then find another way to get around it. But you can be committed to restoring connection. So I want to find about how my mother did at school, or what her childhood was like, or if you're a care provider and you want to find out some other specifics about health or social connections, you can start by sharing your own experience. So my mother knows what happened when I grew up. Maybe I could say, Mommy, when I was growing up, one of the things I enjoyed most was coming from school and seeing you there with the meals ready, or watching you prepare my uniform for me, and talk about my experience, and then say, what was it like? Did you have that kind of experience? What was it like for you? It kind of opens the way for some sharing. Mark you, the issues you're trying to come up, to get exposed and get discussed may be so painful that not even that will open it. But sometimes when you turn it around to get the older person to give suggestions and to take the lead in saying how something should be done, it may break this cycle of uncoupling. They may just come out and give their opinion, move on with it, and that would make it better. So these are some of the things that Dr. Soli has shared, which I find very useful. I go back to the beginning of the slide and give due consideration to the differences in the realities of older and younger persons and how it impacts communication. We looked at the fact that younger persons, whether caregivers or otherwise, may have their own agenda. They may have their own pace at which they need to move. And the older person who has already achieved and think that they have gotten to this point now where, they need to move at their own pace. We need to understand that difference in terms of differences in realities can result in barriers to communication, because once the younger persons may interpret it as this person being stubborn, this person being set in their ways and cannot change and all of that. and an understanding that they themselves want to maintain control or they want to share their experiences as legacy. We also wanted to make a list of common barriers to communication with older persons, which we have looked at. Some of the things we're talking about, the repeating stories or they refuse to talk about stuff. There may be differences in language, as we started earlier, modern means of communication, the language, the experiences are different, so they become barriers as we seek to move on. Be able to explain approaches in dealing with 5 common communication barriers explained by Dr. Soli. These are the 5 barriers we just looked at. Maintaining control, leaving a legacy were 2 broad areas that we look at. But in terms of some specific barriers, it spoke about the pace. They move at their own pace. The uncoupling, anybody remembers any? Repeating, yes. The same story over and over. Yes, Arisha?
There was loss of direction or something like that. Not direction.
Non-linear conversation.
Non-linear.
Yeah. So they're coming up with many stories in the one conversation. Repetition.
And
attention to details when they want things done exactly how they used to do it. Uncoupling, which we covered, right? So we have touched the areas for the objectives, to meet the objectives. I have put a slide in it that in which I have rephrased yesterday's thing for yesterday in terms of the portfolio entry. Where you have to prepare a portfolio of yourself and then explain how effective communication with older persons can make your life and work easier and better. That should not be a long thing. So I have put something for today, so I won't give you anything else to do before next week. And for today's session, what you are going to do, send. This is not send. This should be spend. So the P is missing. Spend some time talking to an older person about or some of their life experiences or an experience. Then you observe them as they talk about it. You listen for the values and meanings they shared. So you're going to be looking at, when they brighten up and when they get excited and when they smile about what happened. So you can sense that this is real. And kind of search for what is the value in the story they're giving. Then you respond in a way you consider appropriate. Whether tell me more really or whatever, but you're not going to take over the conversation and talk about your story. You allow them to continue with their sharing. Then you document this experience in your portfolio and include some lessons you may have learned. Bearing in mind some of what we look at first in terms of where they're trying to leave a legacy. Do you see that coming out in what they're talking about? Or is it that they're trying to maintain control of their lives and whatever it is that they're losing? Or is it that they're just joyful about their accomplishments and they're sharing that? So these are some things you can look out for. It does not have to be long as it takes for them to share their story. You nod and you may take your notes or whatever. You can have somebody maybe take your picture doing this and get their permission to do it. If it's a relative, then you know it's okay. And put that as part of your portfolio. The important thing is that we are listening now with another kind of view. We're listening for other things now. What is important to them? What about legacy? What about, sharing and maintaining control? You're looking out for some of these things. So this is why in this story, you are going to look out for what are the values? What are the important things for this person? What causes this person to be happy when they're talking about certain point? What it is that made them come alive? What it is that made them sad? And you may ask simple questions like, you seem to be sad when you talk about that. Do you want to say more? So you may probe and get some meaning from that. So we have come to another end of another class. Seems like all our classes will be going 1 hour and a half. But today I'm happy for the kind of participation that was evident, people sharing this was really good for me because I really don't like to be doing all the talking. And I hope that it has helped us to kind of put in perspective another angle of communication in terms of different perspectives and realities of the different age groups as the communication process takes place. Any questions, comments? Clear as mud?
For
Are you?
the portfolio, you say you wanted it like in a folder, or you want?
Yes, like you or Richard who are here, you can do that. But if you want to do as the others who are at distance, you can, where you do it electronically and submit it as a. And if you have those wonderful new kinds of software or whatever it is where you think can look like a little book where you're turning the leaves. I don't know how to do them, I just see them and I like them. Anything that will get me excited. You communicate that you put special touch to your work, you earn bonus marks.
Okay.
All right then. Thank you all. Have a good evening.